In 1972, a new house in this country cost $27,600, and one paycheck bought it. The middle of the market. Not a bargain, not a fixer, just the ordinary house an ordinary family moved into. And the family paying for it earned around $11,000 that year. The house cost them 2.5 years of everything they made. 2.5 years. That ratio is the spine of this whole story. It is how one paycheck covered a house, a car, and 6 people at the supper table. Number 10 is the household bill that has changed more since then than any other, and it is not the one people name. And number 3 is how a family of 6 still put money away every month. 15 things one 1972 paycheck paid for, and the arithmetic underneath them that stopped holding somewhere in the years after. Subscribe before we start. There are numbers in this one you will want to write down. We begin at 15. Number 15. The tank of gasoline. 36 cents a gallon. That was the average price at the pump across 1972. And a man could fill a 20-gallon tank on a full-size sedan for $7.20. Nobody watched the numbers roll. Nobody did math at the pump. You told the attendant to fill it, he washed the windshield while it ran, and you handed him a 5 and a couple of 1s and got change back. Gas was not a line in the household budget because it was too small to bother naming. It was pocket money, the same as a haircut or a pack of cigarettes. That 36 cents held steady all year, and it had held roughly steady for a decade before that. A family thought nothing of driving 400 miles to see grandparents over a long weekend, because the fuel for the round trip came to about $14, and the children rode in the back of the wagon without seat belts, and nobody thought about that either. Which is exactly why what happened to that number 18 months later hit households the way it did. But that comes later on this list. Before the tank, there was the table. Number 14. The grocery bill. In 1970, Americans spent about 13.8 cents out of every after-tax dollar on food. All of it. Groceries, restaurants, the whole business of eating. Today, that same figure runs under 10 cents. The mother of a family of 6 shopped once a week, sometimes twice, and she shopped against a list she had written at the kitchen table with a pencil. She bought a chuck roast because it was cheaper than a rib roast, and she knew how to cook it slow. She bought the store brand of everything the family would not notice. Food took a bigger share of the paycheck than it does now, and it took more hours to turn into dinner, but a woman managing that budget was not managing an emergency. She was managing a routine. Now, about the paycheck she was managing it out of. Number 13. The paycheck itself. The median American family took in $11,120 in 1972, according to the Census Bureau. That is the middle of the country, half above, half below. And when you narrow it to families where the head of the household worked year-round and full-time, the median was $13,520. Say those numbers out loud, and they sound like nothing. $13,000. That is a used car now. But this is the point that gets lost every time somebody puts these figures on a screen without the prices next to them. The number is not the story. What the number bought is the story. And what came out of it before it ever reached the kitchen table was smaller than most people remember. Number 12. What the government withheld. In 1972, the Social Security tax on an employee was 4.6% of wages, and the hospital insurance piece, what became Medicare, added another 0.6%. 5.2% altogether. And it applied only to the first $9,000 a man earned that year. Above 9,000, that deduction stopped entirely. A worker making 13,500 paid Social Security on 9,000 of it and nothing on the rest. Today, the wage base runs well past $180,000, and the employee rate is 6.2% plus Medicare on every dollar with no ceiling at all. The deduction was there in 1972. It was just a smaller hand in a smaller pocket. Those first four are the easy ones. They are the numbers people trot out when they want to make a point about how much cheaper things used to be, and taken alone, they are almost useless. Cheap gas next to a low wage tells you nothing. What matters is the relationship between the two. And there is one relationship that governed the entire household economy of that decade. Everything a family bought was priced against the years of work it took to earn it, not the dollars, the years. Hold that in your head, because the next four items are where that arithmetic starts doing things that will not look possible. Number 11. The house. $27,600 was the median price of a new home sold in the United States in 1972. That figure comes from the Census Bureau, and it is the middle of every new house that changed hands that year, from Bangor to San Diego. Regionally, it ran from about $25,800 in the South to $31,400 in the Northeast. And it was not a small house. It was 3 bedrooms, a full basement in most of the country, a garage, and a yard the children were sent out into after supper. Set that price against the $11,120 a median family earned, and you get a ratio of about 2.5. 2.5 years of gross income for the entire house. That single number explains more about the 1970s than any other figure on this list, and it is the one that has moved furthest since. Number 10. Healthcare. This is the household bill that changed more than any other, and hardly anybody names it first. In 1970, total health spending in the United States came to $353 per person for the year. Everything. Doctors, hospitals, drugs, all of it, divided across every man, woman, and child in the country. In 2024, that same per-person figure was $15,474. Health spending was 18% of the entire American economy that year. In 1970, it was a fraction of that. Now, some of what that money buys did not exist in 1972, and a person who would have died then survives now, and that is worth saying plainly. But from the household side of the ledger, a family in 1972 simply did not budget for medicine the way a family budgets for it now. It was closer to a small line than a large one, which left room for something else. Number 9. The mortgage payment. The average contract rate on a conventional home loan in 1972 was 7.45%. Higher than a lot of people assume. Nobody was getting 3% money in the Nixon years. But run the arithmetic on that median house. $27,600, 20% down. $22,080 borrowed at 7.45 over 30 years, and the payment for principal and interest lands right around $154 a month. Call it $1,850 a year. Against a median family income of $11,120. That is under 17% of gross pay before taxes and insurance. And the man carrying it expected to burn the paper before he turned 60. The rate was not the thing that made it work. The price was. Number 8. The car in the driveway. A new car in 1972, listed for somewhere around $3,500, depending heavily on what you bought and where. A full-size sedan sat in the low 3,000s. A loaded Cadillac ran past 7, and most families with 4 children did not buy new. They bought the 3-year-old wagon off the lot. At the far end of the dealership, they paid cash or carried a short note through the credit union, and they drove it until the floor pans went. A man who could set his own timing and change his own points spent nothing on labor for a decade. Parts came off a pegboard at the auto supply on Saturday morning, and the fellow behind the counter knew the part number for a '68 Impala without looking it up. The car was not an identity in that household. It was a tool that started in January, and if it started in January, it stayed. Understand what that meant against the paycheck. $3,000 spread across a family that took in $11,000 a year was not a payment somebody carried for 6 or 7 years. It was a note you cleared and were done with, and then for a long stretch afterward, the driveway cost nothing but gasoline and a set of plugs. So the paycheck covered the house, the car, the food, and the fuel. Here is where the story turns, because a question has been sitting under every number so far. Whose paycheck? The phrase one income gets thrown around loosely about that decade, and it deserves an actual figure rather than a feeling. The current population survey has been asking the question since the 1960s, and the answer it gives is specific, and it changed more completely between then and now than the price of the house did. Number 7. The single earner household. In 1967, in 36% of American married couple families, the husband was the only person with earnings from work. Better than one household in 3. In 44%, both husband and wife had earnings. By 2007, the husband-only share had fallen to 18%, and the both-earning share had climbed to 58%. Cut the one-earner household in half and double the two-earner household, and you have described the largest change in the structure of the American family budget in the post-war century. It happened for many reasons, some of them women wanting work and getting it, which was overdue. But it also happened alongside a set of prices that stopped fitting inside one salary. Number 6. A year of college. 1972 to 73. At a public 4-year college in the United States, the average charge for tuition, required fees, a dormitory room, and board came to $1,553. Tuition and fees alone were $503. That is the National Center for Education Statistics, and it covers the whole year, room and food included. $1,553 against a median family income of $11,120. 14% of 1 year's gross income for a full year of a state university with a bed and 3 meals a day. By 2022 and 23, that same all-in figure at a public 4-year school was $22,389. The building is often the same building. The arithmetic is not the same arithmetic. Number 5. The bottom rung. The federal minimum wage in 1972 was $1.60 an hour. A high school boy bagging groceries or pumping gas full-time through a summer, 40 hours across 13 weeks, cleared $832 before withholding. Set that against the $1,553 a year of state college cost, and one summer at the legal floor covered better than half of it. Add the Christmas break and a Saturday job through the school year, and a determined kid genuinely could work his own way through. which is why so many men now in their 70s will tell you they did. They are not exaggerating. The numbers were on their side in a way the numbers have not been since. And that $1.60 was the floor, not the going rate. 21 states had set their own minimums above the federal one by that year. Massachusetts at $1.75 and Alaska at $1.70. A boy who could run a forklift or frame a wall was making better than double the floor before he turned 20. Number 4. What she brought in when she worked. In 1970, among married couple families where the wife had earnings, those earnings made up 27% of the family's total income, roughly a quarter. By 2007, the figure was 36%. That shift sounds modest written down, and it was not modest at all in the kitchen, because in 1970, a wife's paycheck was usually the margin rather than the foundation. It bought the second car, the braces, the addition off the back of the house, the week at the lake. The mortgage did not depend on it. When that quarter became better than a third, the second income stopped being the margin and started being load-bearing, and a household that had once been able to absorb a layoff could no longer absorb one. Here is the part of this that deserves saying carefully. None of this was a golden age. A black family's median income in 1972 was $6,860 against $11,550 for a white family, and no amount of nostalgia about cheap gasoline covers that gap. 9 million American families lived on under $5,000 that year. What follows is not an argument that things were better. It is an account of what the arithmetic allowed, for the families the arithmetic worked for, and what happened to it. Number 3. What was left over? This is the one that surprises people. A family of 6, one earner, and there was still money going into the passbook at the end of the month. Across the 1970s, American households saved somewhere between about 9 and 12% of their after-tax income, depending on which revision of the Commerce Department's figures you read. Call it a dime out of every take-home dollar, year after year, as a matter of ordinary habit. In recent years, that rate has run under 5%, and in some months closer to 3%. The families doing the saving in 1972 were not disciplined in some way we have since lost. They were people with a mortgage that took 17% of gross pay, a medical bill measured in the hundreds, and a state university that cost 14% of a year's income. The gap between what came in and what had to go out was simply wider. Saving was what happened in the gap. Number 2. The year it broke. 1972 was the last quiet year. The median new home went from $27,600 that year to $32,500 in 1973, a jump of nearly 18% in 12 months. The average mortgage contract rate climbed from 7.45 to 8.71 by 1974. The 36-cent gallon of gasoline was on its way to $1 and change by the end of the decade after the embargo, and college charges, which had been drifting up gently for years, took their sharpest single-year jump of the entire post-war era in the 1972 to 73 school year. Every hinge on this list moved at once, inside about 24 months, and the wage side did not keep pace with it. Median family income went up about 8% in 1973, which sounds respectable until you set it against prices that rose more than 6% in the same 12 months, and a housing market that rose almost 18%. Families who bought in 1971 did not feel it the same way. Families who waited did, and a good many of them waited for the price to come back down, and it never did come back down. Number 1. The years, not the dollars. Everything on this list resolves into one habit of mind that ordinary Americans in that decade did not know they had. They priced things in years of work. The house was 2.5 years. The car was 3 or 4 months. A year of state college was 7 weeks of pay. Nobody said it that way out loud, and nobody wrote it down, but that was the calculation running underneath every decision at that kitchen table, and it is why a man earning what looks to us like nothing could stand in a driveway he owned. The dollar figures from 1972 are useless on their own. Somebody will always show you the 36-cent gasoline, and somebody else will always answer that wages were low, and both of them are right, and neither of them is saying anything. The only figure that carries meaning across 50 years is the ratio. 27,600 over 11,120. 2.5. So here is one family's year, as the record has it. $11,120 in. About $570 out to Social Security and Medicare. $1,850 to the mortgage, principal and interest. Something over $1,500 to food. $70 to fill the tank a dozen times. And at the end of 12 months of that, roughly a dime out of every dollar that reached the house went into the passbook at the savings and loan. Not because anyone was clever, because the gap was there. If you were running a household in 1972, I would rather hear your figures than mine. What did your mortgage payment actually come to? And what did your husband or your father bring home that year? Put the two numbers in the comments, and let us see how close the middle of the country really was to the middle of this list. I suspect a fair number of you were paying under $150 a month and thought nothing of it at the time. Money remembers what we forget. That is the whole reason for this book.